Flying on an airplane might statistically be the safest way to travel, but that doesn't mean it's a comfortable experience for everyone. Being on an airplane means you have zero control over your fate, a concept that is scary enough for most people without considering all of the other factors that go flying over 30,000 feet in the air. The idea of experiencing extreme turbulence is terrifying, and the idea of crashing is just an absolute nightmare. Planes might not crash every day, but scary stuff does happen. Here are 14 of the scariest things that have ever happened on an airplane. 1. In April 2018, passengers on a Southwest Airlines flight heading to Dallas had to pull a woman back into the plane as she was about to be literally sucked out the window. During the flight, something on an engine broke and smacked into the window, breaking it. The sudden air pressure change pulled the woman into the window pane, where she hung halfway outside the plane for a few minutes. Passengers panicked and thought they were gonna crash, but the plane ended up landing safely. Sadly, the woman who got partially sucked out the window died from her injuries. 2. Everyone on the plane threw up. In March 2018, a seriously rough storm hit the East Coast, canceling almost all flights going in and out of the airports in the area, except for one flight. The pilot later stated that turbulence was so bad that almost everyone on the entire plane vomited. Even the pilots were on the verge of throwing up during the landing. Maybe not one of the truly scary airplane stories out there, but definitely disgusting. 3. There was a gas leak that no crew members noticed. In June 2017, a United Airlines flight to Venice was cancelled when a passenger noticed that fuel was pouring from a wing while the airline was getting ready to take off. Someone in a window seat told the crew about the leak, and the plane was forced to return to the gate. 4. The plane's computer malfunctioned. A pilot navigating a Qantas flight from Singapore to Perth told the story of how the plane's computer went psycho before he managed to save the lives of everyone on board. The Airbus A330's autopilot malfunctioned not once, but twice, dropping the aircraft 690 feet in 23 seconds and then dropping it again another 400 feet in 15 seconds. More than 100 passengers were injured. He said it's the worst thing that can happen when you are in an airplane, when you are not in control. 5. A snake appeared on a plane. If you are afraid of snakes, then being trapped on an airplane with one would certainly be a nightmare. On a 2016 Aeromexico flight leaving Mexico City, a snake actually dangled out of one of the aircraft's overhead storage bins. The snake, thought to be a venomous green viper, fell into a seating area, and the pilot organized an emergency landing, at which point the reptile was secured. 6. The side door was left open. In 2006 Boeing 737-800 flight, a passenger noticed that one of the airplane doors had been left open when they were already 10,000 feet in the air. Passengers heard a windly sound that officials later determined was in fact from a gap in the door. One passenger said the plane flew kind of erratically, which made him feel like something was wrong. Luckily, passengers only reported a nausea and ear pain due to a slow loss of cabin pressure, and the plane landed safely. 7. A girl passed away mid-flight, then had to be buckled in a seat to land. It's bad enough to think about someone dying mid-flight, but imagining someone having taken their own life and then having to be buckled into a seat for a landing is even more tragic. Mid-20-year-old girl flying alone went to the restroom. After a while, the line starts to build up as the passengers can only use one of the two washrooms at the back. After around 10 minutes of no responses, the flight attendant opened the door from the outside and walked in to find both the girls' wrists cut, and she was dead. Before landing, they had to buckle her into one of the free seats Deceased passengers are needed to be buckled in if there is excess turbulence or any sudden movements upon landing. 8. Hail shattered windshield. In June 2018, passengers were left terrified when an American Airlines plane was struck by a hailstorm that left the airplane severely damaged. The Airbus A319 was going from San Antonio, Texas to Phoenix, Arizona when it hit such a bad hailstorm that the plane's windshield shattered and the nose was damaged. Due to virtually no forward visibility, the plane was forced to divert to El Paso. Passengers were crying, panicking, and vomiting as they hoped to land safely. 9. A psychic told everyone they were gonna crash. Even if you don't believe in psychics, this must have been terrifying. It was the flight from Minneapolis to Detroit in October 2009 when a self-proclaimed psychic on board screamed at the top of her lungs that the plane was gonna crash and they all gonna die. They moved her to a private section of the plane to try to calm her down and ease the minds of the panicked passengers. Soon, passengers hit extreme unreported turbulence as soon as beverages were passed out. Drinks were flying through the air, luggage hit a few of the overhead bins open, and people were screaming and terrified, mostly due to the psychic. When the plane reached Detroit, of course the runways were iced over and it slid nearly sideways after touching down. Again, everyone was screaming. When the plane landed, everyone let out a roar of applause. Airport security boarded the plane and detained the psychic. 10. The plane shook like a washing machine. Turbulence is the worst, but sometimes it goes from just uncomfortable to genuinely scary. In 2017, an AirAsia flight experienced a technical issue about an hour and a half into the trip. One passenger said he heard an explosion, explaining how essentially the engine seized up. It was literally like you were sitting on top of a washing machine. The whole thing was going. Passengers could see the engine out the window, which was really shaking on the wing. The plane had to turn back and make an emergency landing in Perth. 11. A plane lost an engine. Imagine losing an entire engine while flying. At almost exactly the midway point across the Pacific to Hawaii from LA, a 757 lost an engine. With the winds and available fuel on board, it became a critical situation. The aircraft diverted to Hilo, but even then all calculations said it would come up short. The crew began activating the crash team and started the crash checklist, preparing the manifest and such. Somehow the pilots managed to conserve enough fuel to make it to Hilo. The passengers may have known there was an engine not working, but they surely had no clue how dire the situation was. 12. A plane lost all electrical power. Flying into a high elevation port in Asia, 23,000 feet on descent, had a total loss of electrical power. All screens went dark, including standby instruments and emergency lighting. To put this into perspective, Airbus designed this aircraft with 3 electrical generators in addition to power supplied by batteries, the emergency generator. It's designed never to be without electrical power, even both the engines failed. You run completely out of fuel and the auxiliary power unit is inoperative. It's a scenario pilots are not even trained for because it's never supposed to happen. The plane landed safely. Passengers didn't notice a thing apart from the lights temporarily going out in the cabin. The car analogy would be you driving at 100 kilometers per hour on a highway and suddenly all your windows are covered up. You lose your speedometer and all electrical systems. There is no response from the brake or accelerator, but you can still feel the car going. 13. A plane clipped a building. In 2013, a British Airways plane going to London actually clipped its wing on a building as it was preparing for takeoff out of Johannesburg, South Africa. The plane was taxiing on the runway when its wing hit the building. Luckily, no one was seriously injured. Still, imagine? 14. The landing gear wasn't working correctly. One flight assistant told of her scariest flight. They were flying into an airport in California from Hawaii, and during the pre-landing checks, it was discovered the landing gear wasn't functioning and that it wouldn't deploy or come down. After circling the airport to burn up fuel, fire and emergency personnel were put into place at the airport and the cabin secured, they began their descent. She was sitting in the jump seat and she said there was a fellow mechanic on board in front of her. He looked her directly in the eye and gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head, letting her know the situation was very dire. As they were coming down to land, she and the other flight attendants were in their seats yelling at the passengers at the top of their lungs, "Brace! Brace!" while they were all in position for impact. She said it was the one time she thought for sure she'd never see her son and husband again. Miraculously, the landing gear deployed at the very last moment, saving them from having to land on the belly of the plane. Once they got all the passengers off and were back at the hotel, the last thing she wanted was to get back on a plane to go back home to Hawaii. She called her husband, also FA for the same airline, and told him what had happened, said the flight crew were being told they could either stay overnight in the hotel and fly out the next day or fly back to the island that night on a different plane. Her husband told her she needed to get back on the plane that night or she'd never have the ability to fly with confidence again. She did as he said, and this being over 10 years ago, he was right. She's still a flight attendant with the airline today. We hope you enjoyed the video. Please don't forget to click the like button and subscribe for more interesting videos. Have a nice day!